for our next session, I'll be moderating a Q&A with our next speaker, who I'm excited to welcome to the main stage. Diego James Navarro, Professor Emeritus at Cabrillo College and the founder of the Academy for College Excellence, (ACE), has been working in the education space for 30+ years and designed the program Guided Pathways, a proven student onboarding strategy and experience that instills cultures of dignity and belonging in students that has statistically proven to move the needle on a number of meaningful metrics. So Diego, thank you for joining us today, and excited to get into discussing some questions. So in addition to introducing yourself, the first, I think, question that we had talked about was, what was the problem you were trying to solve? Or what was the problem that you saw in kind of higher education? So welcome to our summit, and over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Tyler. I very much appreciate this invitation from Karen and yourself to speak here. I've been working with Simpli5, your technology and your technology for a long time, since 2000. So it's been really wonderful to be here. I just want to mention this background is it was in Southeast Asia. I was just in Indonesia for snorkeling, and I've been gone for a month. So sorry I came in 5 minutes beforehand because I'm still in jet lag mode. Well, to answer your question, the problem I was trying to solve, let me have a student tell you a little about it, because I can show you have a video, just a very short thing. Student named Anna, who came over the border in, I don't know, it was she was in my second cohort, the spring of 2004. And I'm here in Santa Cruz, California, and in what's called South County is Watts. And there are students that were disconnected from education, or not students, there were individuals between 18 and 26 that were disconnected from education, from employment, and from other issues like that. And the city manager of Watsonville came to Cabrillo College and asked if there was anything we could do to help support this need they had. And so coming from HP Labs and having a research background, I went and interviewed 120 people in the first 2 months just to try to figure out what was going on there and nationally regarding this type of issue. And so the student I'm going to introduce you to, Anna, was a kind of a typical student that I was working with. And I met Anna when she was at the adult school, which I found to be the best recruiting place for students that really wanted to change their lives. And she was in a course learning computer skills. And she was 26 years old. And I came to this course to recruit students. And the teacher said, you need to talk to this student, Anna. She's pretty amazing. So I went and I talked to Anna, and invited her to a orientation, because my first semester, I was towards the end of the first semester of teaching this program we set up. And she said, Diego, I can't go to Cabrillo. And I was going, well, why not? And so then she told me a little bit about her story. And she was 26 at the time, had 4 children. But when she was when she came across the border, she was like 11 years old, and with her mother and her sister through Arizona, and they ended up in Southern California. And within a year, they felt the Migra was coming after them, the immigration group. And so they moved to Watsonville. And so a year later, she had her 8th grade graduation at this huge celebration, because she's the first person in her family to graduate from 8th grade. And then a year later, they had a quinceañera, which is a rites of passage for Latino and Hispanic young people, women. And but when she was at her quinceañera, right afterwards, she found out that she was pregnant. And she dropped out of school, started working. And by the time that I met her, she had 4 children and been working 2 jobs for all those years. 11 years, and was burnt out and was trying to find something to change her life so that she could be with her children and not have to work all the time. And one thing I found out about her and other students I work with is they don't know their strengths. they don't know their strengths. They think they're one thing because society or their family or their experiences have told them that they're one way. So I invited her to come and talk, and she said, I can't do that. But she came with her friend Rosalba, who was in her class as well. And she said, I can't go to Cabrillo College because I never went to high school. And I said, don't worry about high school. I have students that didn't go to high school that are in my program right now, because I was towards the end of my first semester. And so let's hear what she has to say a little bit about what her life and experience is like. And let me find the. Now the trick, here it is. I'm not going to go through all these slides, so don't worry about that. They're just
No
backups. When I talk about numbers and results and stuff, it's important to have graphs. So this is Anna, and this is her talking a little bit about her experience.
I learned about myself. I learned what to expect from me. What else could I do to get my kids out from the hole I was? And I said, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this. I can make it. I know I can.
What I found over the years is that our students have a strength in persistence and a strength in survival. They come to a community college going through really difficult situations in their lives, things that I wouldn't want my children to go through, and things that I went through. I grew up in a tough neighborhood, and my mother died when I was 15. So I kind of have the background of what these students bring, and they have a strength in survival and resilience, and they don't know it. And they're very smart, really smart. And so what she wanted to do was something for her kids. And what happened to her after that? Never went to high school, went through our program, was one semester long, and she was an honor student coming out of our program. And of course, everybody would say, yes, she's in your program, you're all going to grade her well. But then she did all of her prerequisites for the nursing program. So that's 2 years of science, college level science. She stayed an honor student the whole time, went into the nursing program, became a nurse. So here's a student never went to high school. And so how do you help a student who has strengths in persistence and survival? How do you help them shift from who they think they are to who they really are? And I think that the Simpli5, I'll call it technology. I'm not exactly sure what you call it. But the Simpli5 technology is crucial in making that transition for the students. And so what we're doing in the beginning of my program, and this is the end of my answer to your first question, so you're not too worried about. So let me share the screen again. So in the community college space, what we're realizing is that you have to deal with onboarding, and what we call onboarding. So you have students that are coming to the college. Many of them were not successful in college. I'm not successful in high school. So they see themselves coming to college. They don't know, who they are, what they're about. Students that are not only 18 years old coming out of high school and didn't do well in high school, but those that are much older that dropped out or whatever their life experience led them to be. And so what the Community College Research Center at Columbia University has found is that there's 4 things you need to do. Is you need to connect with them, you need to find out where they want to go, to inspire them and plan. But the problem with this model is that they're trying to figure out how to inspire. And so they bring me in when Davis Jenkins does his talks and stuff, because what I focus on is inspire. So the thing that my research has been focused on is really inspiring students. And so that's what I'll talk a little bit about, is that experience of what we do and how Simpli5 helps us with that.
Well, I know when we were talking over the summer, kind of leading up to this, I went to a 4-year university. It was a small liberal arts college. They had a week-long program, but not every institution has that, or they have different flavors of it, or it's all outdoors and fun and more peer and connection related than it is potentially about giving me the skills and the lens. And I think a narrative and a theme that you've heard from your years of experience and interaction with 5 Dynamics and Simpli5, but also something that's come from our other speakers, is that it really provides a mirror, first off, right? Understanding yourself, and then kind of taking the mirror down and you see your peers or your coworkers in a slightly completely different way. So for those first semester students, how was Five Dynamics incorporated into that experience? And what were some of those epiphanies and aha moments that you saw with the students?
Good question. What I found is that students didn't know who they were. So that fundamentally that was the issue that I was trying to address. And I was working with Michael Sturm, who is the inventor of Five Dynamics, the founder of the company. And what I was finding is that I needed to help the students light a fire inside of themselves. And I wasn't sure how to do that. And what was going on at this time in the community college space was that they were trying to figure out how to deal with the 60% of students that drop out from the first year to second year. So 60% attrition rate, that's pretty high.
Yeah.
And for
really
those that were not prepared for college, if they were not prepared for college in math, only 15% ever made it out of developmental math. And in English, it was 33%. So the numbers were really bad. And so the big focus at that point was on math acceleration and English acceleration. And what I did was I focused on a different problem. I didn't think the problem was math and English. I don't think it was about learning. It was about who they were, about how they could see their own strengths. So I went looking for a styles indicator, because when I was at Hewlett Packard and you move up in management, they'd have you take this course, and the course had a 360-degree assessment that your peers did, and then they would tell you kind of these 4 styles. And it was like, oh, interesting. But with Michael, I was saying, Michael, I came out of graduate school, went to Harvard Business School, and I was an expert in teams. And I was going, I want something that ties to teams and team development. And so he laid this out for me and talked about the success satisfaction cycle. I went, exactly, that's what we need. And I was really glad to hear that he used, Gestalt theory to deal with this stuff, to actually unlock kind of the issue that we needed to unlock here. And so the thing was like, how do I take a student through an experience so they can discover themselves? And I wanted it to be a rites of passage, because if you design education around rites of passage, it has a much more powerful sticking capability. And I'll go into some independent research studies that have been done about the program. And so what we did was, I did 5 pilots over a year and a half. I had enough funding from the Hewlett Foundation and the James Irvine Foundation. And I did 5 pilots, of which 2 of the 5 were using the Five Dynamics technology. And what we were trying to do is, could we light a fire inside of students? And my hypothesis was that we could light a fire in these very colorful, high-risk students in 3 weeks. I had experience doing it in 1 week when I was in my 20s in a different type of environment. And I thought it'll take 3 weeks. And so we would do these 1-week pilots, and at the end of the pilots, everybody would light up. And the approach that we took with Five Dynamics approach was to have the students learn how to see the styles of other people. And we did it through movies, outside speakers, and they would, from seeing, then we'd have them say, who are you? And so then they would use the rubric we had, and they would say who they were. So we had a conscious picture of who they thought they were after 2.5 days. And but we also did the assessment beforehand, and then we overlaid them in a spider diagram, and you would start to see the difference, between them. And so then the students would go into a self-discovery mode, like, oh, this computer program says I'm like this, and I think I'm like that, but who am I? And so it would be a self-discovery piece that would happen. And not only that, they would also see the styles of other people, and they would know what the strengths were of those individuals. And then we did some team communication, performance stuff the second half of the first week, and that augmented their abilities as leaders. So what I was doing is training them as leaders in a way that they wouldn't get in any college environment. I didn't get that at Harvard Business School at all. And you're able to know the strengths of the individuals, their gifts, and where they fit into a process that you're working on, whatever it may be, because we go through this 4-stage process. Yeah, so that's what we do, is focus on getting to know themselves.
Well, I think one of the interesting things, and again, something that Karen and I instantly connected on, and I even recall back to one of my initial conversations with her, I was effectively describing my own collegiate experience. And while my energetic kind of profile is excite plus and execute plus, So a college experience for me was all about the people, because that's just kind of how I'm oriented. Not everybody is that way, but I have a lot of friends that went through their 20s, were MDs, lawyers, and now all of a sudden they're completely different trajectories. And not to say that that wasn't their predestined life experience because of those external factors. Their parents were telling them one thing, their friends were telling them the other. But boy, if I would have known a little bit more about myself early on when I was kind of ready for it, what would that have done to my 20s? And I'm sure for everybody on the phone, there's a similar, like, if I only knew now what I knew, kind of that, that whole kind of saying. I think that we may have had different choices, or it might have avoided some of those catastrophic, stressed out, I can't do it, I don't like it moments, where some of those epiphanies are born from. But if you can avoid some of that, to me, that was always kind of the plain chestnut checkers. So as you had students go through this program, what were some of the results? What were the impacts beyond the right in the moment, wow, this is me, I didn't know this was me. But where did you kind of start to see traction?
Well, that's another good question. Well, I want to go back to what you were saying earlier about you had this 1 week, when you started college. And, my daughter went to Swarthmore. They had a 2-week program and my son, he did his graduate work at Stanford. They had an orientation that was several weeks long. And community college, you know what they do? You go to an orientation for an hour or two and they show you where the bathrooms are and they show you where the library is, and that's what the orientation is. And then they moved from that to an online orientation, and that was the orientation. And here you have very high-risk students trying to change their lives and their image of who they are, and they're giving them, an online orientation. So, I think that the whole issue is, how do you take them through a deep experience so that they get to know themselves? And I keep looking to the right because I have an iPad here that I'm looking at my notes, and it keeps going off because it has 10% left in the battery. That might tell you a little bit about what my styles are. So let me answer your question about the results. So what I started to see was that students were shifting, and they were doing well in the classroom, and they were doing well with, I had English faculty, I had faculty that were doing science with them and so forth. But the faculty at the end of the semester would go, oh my God, these students aren't, they're not going to make it, or they're going to cause havoc in the other classes, because we create a deep family connection. And so students are acting out a lot of their wounds and stuff. It's kind of like a family over that semester. But what the faculty, they were comparing with the regular classes that they had, where the students really didn't know each other, and where this community, they really got to know each other. So what I did was what I started to see was that the students were changing, and that something fundamental was happening. So the National Science Foundation funded research in this area, and for my first cohort. And so they did a longitudinal study and found that our students had a huge difference in their grades. And so then that led the Hewlett Foundation and Irvine Foundation to say, we need to get a really in-depth study done. And so that's when we brought in the Community College Research Center from Columbia University. And they did our first study. And what they found in the study, and I forgot what the control was, like 20,000 students or something like that. And it was a regression analysis that they did in that one. And that study showed that our students had 132% difference than the control group in passing transfer level math or English after they came out of our semester. Now, let me tell you, 132% difference. At that time, people salvated over 8%. So they salvated over 8%. However, I'd been doing one cohort a semester for the 5 years that they were looking at, or the 4 years they were looking at. So the issue that they found was that we only had an N of 60. So he couldn't publish the study because the N was too small. However, the Gates Foundation got a hold of that study, and they were looking at 8%. And they were going, look at this thing, and this is done by CCRC. So then they funded us multi-million-dollar, multi-year grant to scale this work at other colleges around the country, and then do an in-depth study. So the study I'm going to share with you right now is a study that was done that followed the Community College Research Center study. That the methodology they used was what's called quasi-experimental design. It's what's known as propensity score match comparison groups, if you're familiar with that at all. And so in this study, what they found, it was 1,000 students. So the N was a good N. It was at 4 colleges. It was a very high risk group in the sense of how they measure risk. Underrepresented groups was almost 80%. A lot of males in the program, which is a very risky a group that doesn't do well usually. You'll see how many levels below English if they were in 48% were 2 levels or more below in college level English, and 42% were 1 level or below. So you're talking about over 90% of them, and almost 90% of them assessed 2 or more levels below in college math. Almost 26% were high school dropouts. So I mean, this is a very colorful, what I would call a colorful group. The mean age was 24. Well, what the slides are showing you, which you're not going to be able to read, but I'll share with you. The reason why this study was so important is that marginalized students outperform their peers significantly when a program focuses on creating belonging, trust, deep bonding, leverages their strengths, and helps them find themselves. So I wasn't focused on math. I wasn't focused on English. I just made sure they placed them 1 level below so that whatever the students did, no matter where they assessed, they would be able to go into college level English. So this 1,000-student study was done. And what they found is that in English, there was 128% difference than the control group. So here we have scaled the program, 1,000 students. When Davis Jenkins did the study, it was 132%. It was 128% after we scaled it. And one of the reasons why we're able to get the numbers is that we have what's called an integrity model. So we understand kind of what the levers are, that if you get them right, you'll get the results that you need. And one of the levers is this 1-week experience. And in order to train faculty to go through that, to teach that experience, they have to go through it themselves. So I have a lot of data now of faculty, over 2,000 faculty that have gone through it, and their assessments are more skewed in terms of their understanding of their strengths. And then what the computer assessment says is more different than what my at-risk students are like. So it's very interesting. They go through the same experience. And I did it twice this summer, once at Cal State Los Angeles with a group of faculty, and the other one in Syracuse, New York. Now in math, this study also did math acceleration. And what we found was that there was over a 300% difference in passing transfer level math over the control group, and passing both transfer level math and transfer level English 1 semester afterwards, it was over a 600% difference. So changing the student's sense of self and helping them get in touch with their strengths and abilities outperforms trying to just focus on math or focus on English acceleration.
So I'm curious, Diego, with such a focus on the individual first and kind of building their self-awareness, do you feel like that then translated to, if a student is more confident, they'll be, with themselves and kind of an understanding of themselves, that they'll be more successful with whatever's in front of them, a small obstacle, a big obstacle, whether that's learning, whether that's anything else. But it seems like self-confidence, which again is a positive outcome of that, seems like that's a common denominator, that if a student can capture that, then it's kind of like batter up, right? Anything that comes at them, they'll be more agile and flexible and navigating a path through that.
In this area of academic research, they don't call it self-confidence, they call it self-efficacy. And it's based on Al Bandura's work at Stanford on social learning theory. And so if you can help students shift their self-efficacy, you can actually change their lives. And what we found in this work is that we can actually do that. And let me share with you another study that was done. So this was part of the Gates Foundation study, but I was interested in looking at the academic outcomes. But more than that, I felt that, the research shows that self-efficacy, if you're high in self-efficacy, you do well. But there isn't research that shows you that you can change people's self-efficacy. So what we wanted to do was to show, do things change and how fast do they change? Because with the types of students I was working with, and mind you, what I was trying to do was show that education can be used as an alternative to prisons. That education was the right thing, because I recruited at residential drug treatment programs. I had probation officers, parole officers. I mean, the students I worked with were very, very colorful, and we were having these types of results with them. And so what I wanted to look at was, how fast can you make the change and does it stick? Well, we know it stuck because you could look at the outcomes of the academic performance. And I'll show you later, we did a capstone study, a 6-year longitudinal study looking at academic and salary outcomes. And I'll share with you that information as well. That was funded by the Joyce Foundation. But this study was showing what changed inside the students. Can you actually measure that? And what would it look like? And so I was working with Martin Chemers at University of California, Santa Cruz. And what he and my team, and then the team over at MPR Associates in Berkeley did was we developed an instrument that was based on instruments that were already proven to be effective in measuring self-efficacy, and I'll share with you what the types of things that we were measuring. And so this study looked at college identity, which was another factor that showed correlation to students being successful in college, academic self-efficacy and hope, mindfulness. We looked at 4 mindfulness constructs. And the reason why we looked at mindfulness is that if you look at prefrontal lobe research, it shows that mindfulness is very effective in maturing the prefrontal lobes and getting the wiring right. And you could look at, the work being done at UCLA Medical School. I mean, a lot of R1 universities, Stanford, Harvard, University of Pennsylvania, are doing a lot of mindfulness research because it's so effective. And Ellen Langer's work at Harvard School of Education was in mindful learning, and very powerful stuff. She was doing this back in the 90s or in the 80s. And so what we did is we measured mindfulness as well. And what they found in doing this study, out of 8 factors, and we did the exploratory and confirmatory factor analysis and stuff to develop this whole thing, was that after the 2-week foundation of leadership course, students improved in 7 of the 8 factors at a statistical level of 0.001 of significance. And with the exception of 2 of these factors, the change remained consistent or improved 4 months later, because we did the measurement before they came in the program, after the 2 weeks, and then at the end of the semester. And then now we have longitudinal data that shows that academically they outperform their peers. Okay, so there's something that's happening there. And this is sort of more details around it, but I don't know if that's really important at this point. So that's what we did. But more importantly, in our last study, which was a 6-year longitudinal study, we did several things. One was we interviewed over 400 students. And they found that these students were developing 21st century professional skills, but giving them the ability to see the styles of other people, giving them the ability to understand how teams worked, giving them the ability to be leaders innately, and then teaching them how to work on teams, which is the second half of that week-long thing. What they found in this study, that many of these students we had gone through the program 15 years before. 15 years before. These are 400 students that they interviewed. These students remembered exercises that they went through. They remembered the terminology. They remembered the experiences they had. Because when you do experiential education, you do something where they experience something at a very deep level, it shifts them. And it has a more permanent basis to it, besides having, a rites of passage type of design, which we did. So this last study I'll share with you is a 6-year longitudinal study. And this is the salary outcomes. So if you look at this 2-credit. So what we did was we had a nursing cohort in Watsonville at Salinas College, and the president of the college said, we're having problems in our nursing program. It's our best program. We have if you look at Salinas, it's 90% Latinos community, and a lot of farm workers there in Salinas Valley. And so she felt that if they could turn around their nursing program, its attrition rate was not good, that would actually change things. So we brought it in, did a 1 week with them. We contextualized it for medicine and nursing, and we took them through the same experience. And so then that was back in 2009 that we took the faculty through that experience, and then did the pilot that summer. And so we had, 5 or 6 years, we had 480 nursing students that had gone through this experience. And so we did a propensity score match comparison group, but the comparison group was the nursing program, before they changed it over, because when they changed it over, all students had to go through it. So there was no selection bias in the study. And so they compared it to the students that went beforehand for a number of years, and they matched them doing propensity score match comparison group. And what they found was 6 years later, the students that went through that 1 week, and that's all they went through because they changed nothing else in the program. Students that went through that 1 week had close to a over $40,000 median salary difference. And I call that promotion readiness. We're not just getting our students ready for college, we're getting them ready for professional lives where they're promotion ready. because they are leaders now, and it shows. And what we had heard anecdotally before this from the faculty is that the second year clinicals were transformed because of this change that we had made in their program. But we wanted the hard data, so we now have the actually salary differences.
I think those metrics to me are so off the charts in terms of the impact, because clearly just impacting someone on an individual level in terms of them understanding themselves, that's altruistic, right? I think that's, making the world a better place one relationship at a time. But when it translates to earning potential, when it translates to earning power, and we heard this yesterday with Dr. Morris Singer and Dr. Smithson, we need to teach students, for in their instance, not just the science of medicine, but the art of medicine. You could say that in the college education world, you could say that in the corporate world. You don't need to teach someone how to do a spreadsheet. You need to teach the person about the team that's going to interact with the spreadsheet as much as the spreadsheet. And I think that to me is something that definitely resonates. And I know for many others on the call, that resonates too. Were there any other anecdotes, not statistically in terms of earning power, but again, to your point around, it made me ready to lead, the soft skills, but really the ability to understand, connect, and pull people in a certain direction. I was curious if there were any other anecdotes around that, kind of what it did for them in their professional careers.
Well, not exactly professional careers, but in terms of their leadership. So my students came from colorful backgrounds, very high percentage of them. And so in terms of Cabrillo College, they like to recruit students that are going into the honors program, and so they're looking for really good, high school students that didn't actually leave home, and so we have all these supports for them, but my program focuses on a different population, helping them become effective college students. Well, over the years that I was at Cabrillo College, and I started to look at it when I left in 2018, because I came back to the foundation and I was visiting, and I picked up the student newspaper, and they were introducing the new president of the student body, and it was another one of my students. And so then I looked back and I saw that out of, I think, 13 years of student body presidents, something like 8 of them were from my program. And these are students that didn't do well in school when they came to college, and they didn't have a sense of themselves as a high performer. And here they are, leaders. I had this one student, that was my first semester. So he came in to that, that beginning program where it's immersion, and he was wearing a hood. This is before hoodies became, known. He was wearing a hood, and he would sit there, and he didn't talk much at all. And I would see it was kind of dark feeling, it was just this feeling I had. He had this hood over his head, and during the breaks, he wouldn't go outside with the other students. He would sit there and he would be reading a book. And so then I just went up to him, talked to him, said, "Hey, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah." And I find out this book he has is taped together because he was in prison and they didn't allow them to read books. So what the prisoners would do is they would rip apart the book, and they would pass, like the first chapter underneath the bars, and it would go around, and they would send the second chapter. I guess he was at the end because he got the full book, and this book had an impact on him. I think it might have been Malcolm X's autobiography, something like that. And it had an impact on him. And, 2 days later, his hood was off. Not only that, a year later, he was one of the student senators. The things just transform in students when they figure out who they are and what their strengths are, and how to be a leader. And it's not just professionals, working at Hewlett Packard, or, I worked at Apple, and it's not those environments. I mean, those environments, yes, but they're already in those environments. These are talking about students that are coming off the streets, coming out of programs where they're adjudicated. It's very powerful.
And I think, again, oftentimes there's people assume that in order to be a leader, you need a title. You can be a leader in your kids' soccer, group. It can be with your neighbors. It can be in an emergency. There's a lot of different ways that leadership can show up. And so to me, I think, that's completely validating, why I joined the company in the first place, was believing that this has an impact well outside the corporate world. It has an impact in personal lives, as I think I shared with everybody. Not to repeat myself, I'm an effortless plus excite, effortless execute, and I'm happily married to an abundant examine. Well, that probably wouldn't have happened and made, you know, been as easy if I hadn't had that self-awareness as well as that lens and to kind of look at everything. Before we open it to questions, and I know we have a few other academics on the line. One of the things on your website, and it's a quote that I thought is just, again, perfectly summarizes kind of the opportunity that we have beyond kind of the great work that you've been doing, but to really kind of take this everywhere, is education is not filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. And I think to me, that's really just a cool embodiment of when you do have a student, everything you just described that happened for those students, it was a lighting of a fire within them. And I think that to me, again, really translates to making the world a better place and helping them be happier, more successful, more satisfied in wherever their careers take them. So
one thing I'd like to mention, you know, a lot of times people think this is a personality test, or they were calling it learning styles assessment. And what I found is that the research shows that learning styles are not real. Okay, they are, and there's no correlation they're finding, and I can give you the references to the studies. But what we're finding is working styles are real. You know, Hewlett Packard invests in it. You know, these companies invest in it because this is real. And if you teach these students something that's real, which working styles are, it's very powerful. Now, the quote that I like, I'll share with you the quote that I share with my students. It's not on our website. It's from Peter Drucker. You know, the success in the knowledge economy, which is the future, comes to those who know themselves, their strengths, their values, and how they best perform. And so, you know, that I sort of orient the students towards getting to know themselves, because once they do that, they're able to be in the world in a way that will have impact.
Yeah, and a lot of our speakers have talked about, and Heather was talking about it earlier, about sometimes, you know, it's kind of a cold splash of water when you read your assessment. Some people think it's spot on. Other people really are grappling with, like, is this really me? And so I think part of that journey for everybody, some people are ready to go and ready to accept, and it's that Kubler change curve, right? Some people are in denial to start before they kind of go through it all. But I guess talk to me a little bit about when you did have students that were in that experience and they didn't agree with what was kind of being presented in front of them. What did you think their, not problems were, but like what was in their way to kind of accepting maybe the truth?
So I have two types of students. One student are the colorful students I've talked about, and students that aren't prepared for college. Real, you know, students. My other students are faculty, administrators, and staff people. And I find that faculty and administrators come in totally armored, many of them. And so my students don't have the issue you just raised, but my students that are faculty administrators sure do. And I just had it this summer, you know, and so the first day, because these are long days, they're from 9 to 5. You know, the first day, I feel the arrows coming at me, you know, from a couple people. But, you know, I look at their styles and I go, oh, of course it's going to be like this, you know? And so then I don't take it in, you know, I just let things go by, because I know 2 days later, they're going to be praising and they're going to be falling in love and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, you know, let them go through what they need to go through. So the proof is in the pudding. I mean, at the end of the 5 days, you know, they fill out an assessment and stuff. The students the faculty and the administrators are transformed. And they stay transformed. I was working with, so I was at Cal State Los Angeles this summer, working with their summer faculty that, let's see, 12 were from the English department. I'm going to get this wrong, but something like that. And 12 were from the statistics and the pre-calc department. And so I took these 25 faculty through this experience, and you know, we met with them just a week or so ago, and they're still talking about it. And this happened in June, you know, and we don't have a longitudinal effect yet of what it did for the students, which we have other studies that show that, but for this cohort that I took through in June, we don't have it from the summer yet. But it impacts them, and it not only impacts them, as I've read in some of these texts and these chats items, but it's personally, you know, I have at the end of these programs, usually they'll come up to me and they'll say, hey, do you do one for spouses? My spouse is telling me how much I've learned, and I think it'd be important for them to go through this too. Do you do it for couples? And it's like, well, no, I don't. And so there's this real interest in getting to know themselves. And I find, one of the reasons why the students do so well academically is that the learning curve and learning to see the styles of other people, the learning curve of learning how to listen and communicate and work effectively, which is the first week of our program, they're going home and they're looking at everybody around them in their lives and figuring it all out. So this learning curve is very steep. And when the brain is learning, the brain is learning. It doesn't matter if they're learning about styles of other people or they're learning math or English. I mean, you're getting the brain, getting it wired for the learning process. So
it's funny when you describe kind of the math department and the English department, not that there are generalizations, but there are archetypes depending on, energetic archetypes in terms of and patterns that you see. And I think, again, a lot of comments that other speakers have shared too is when you have a common language like five dynamics, you don't take it personal because you understand that's that person's first step. And that's just where their first step kind of goes. One of the questions, Diego, yeah, go ahead.
Tyler, this summer with that group, the math and statistics faculty, all but one were Asian. And the one, all were born in Asia. The one that wasn't was born here, but was also Asian. And I had conversations with them in between the breaks, during the breaks and during lunch, because I wanted to know, is this cultural? Is this just a US thing? And what I was finding is that some cultures lean towards certain styles, but they have all the styles in their culture in terms of the individuals. And so it was a fascinating conversation I was having with these individuals, because I had a certain stereotype, if you will, about math and certain cultural backgrounds. So sorry about taking you off your question.
No, I mean, look, regardless of what culture, everybody has all the energies. It's just, dynamics. It's just a matter of how much energy it takes you to go through each dynamic. So a question from the audience. You talked a lot about students knowing themselves. What about from the other perspective with the teacher knowing how the students learn? So meaning if you're an abundant examine and I'm an effortless excite, how have you seen from how you teach students in those moments, how taking into account their energetic profile, how that changes how you're delivering information?
So in the 1 week training we do with faculty and administrators, they work on a project of how would they adapt this to their lives and to their profession. And so the faculty start to redesign their curriculum so that they're doing things that not only focuses on the examine and the execute styles, they're also looking at the other two styles and figuring out how to do that. And so they start to change their curriculum so that it's more experiential. Because when you make it more experiential and you follow a project based on the student success, this success satisfaction cycle, then you're able to cover all the styles. So the faculty start to bring that out. I haven't heard faculty talk too much about, they figure out the style of a student and then they talk to them in a certain way. I think they actually their curriculum so it actually affects students differently, and they know their own style, so they know when they're getting into trouble, and so I think that helps them a lot. Yeah,
I mean, a personal example is I can remember some of the best professor experiences in which, again, because of my energetic profile, I'm a talker, right? I'm moving my hands around. I need to movement. Let's go walk and talk, right? I constantly say that often with my team. And professors that I loved would actually meet me kind of in that moment. Hey, let's walk to the library. Let's go get a coffee. Whereas other professors are like, you show up at this time, I need to know your questions ahead of time, and I'm going to tell you. That style didn't work for me. And so again, you can kind of imagine the benefit that what if, in addition to the curriculum, in addition to that self-awareness, that there was also that kind of the interworkings that happen, at a collegiate level, what that can just help a student that might be struggling along, give them a little more, of an oomph. So another question, this is a personal question for you. What's your five dynamics profile? Everybody's guessing.
Yeah, we could have them all guess. So Karen, I have problems with this because I think of the old model, so I have to. Okay, so I am extreme.
Abundant.
Yeah. Oh, abundant. Oh,
Abundant versus extreme, but abundant explore.
yeah. Abundant
Okay.
explore. And then is it effortless still? Effortless. Okay, so I'm effortless excite. And
And either deliberate or reserved are the only other two that you haven't said, but I'm
I'm
not saying that
deliberate.
those
I'm
are.
deliberate in the other two.
Okay.
But I find that when I'm stressed out, I'm high execute, so I have a fallback.
Yeah. Cool. If anybody else has any other questions, we'll put them in the chat, but we're pretty much coming right up on time. So if we didn't get to your questions, as we've said before, we'll put them into the recap that we do. But Diego, on behalf of the whole Simpli5 team, thank you for not just joining us today, but the work that you've been doing with students that clearly are benefiting in their lives and beyond, with kind of the tailwinds that you're helping them catch, just kind of at the right time. So appreciate you joining us today.
Well, thank you for all that you all have been doing. You've been supporting me for years, and I really appreciate that. Not any company would do that, and I appreciate, because we've gone through a lot of different changes with different funders and stuff. So I really appreciate you hanging in there with us.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Well, thank you, Diego. And now for as Monty Python